Today we have a 2011 Subaru Limited 2.5. We're going to change the head gasket on it. This process is going to be pretty similar to almost all the Subarus.
Yeah.
The 2.2s or the 2.5s, ranging from what, 95 to 2011 at least. Well, I'll put a description on the screen to explain which years it covers. But this is for all the single overhead cam Subarus 2.2 and 2.5 non-turbos. First thing we're going to do is take this part off. Take off that clip and that clip if your engine has it.
Okay, to drain the radiator, we got to take off the splash guard. There's a bunch of clips all around, 2 here, 3 on each side of the wall, and then you'll get access to the spigot, which is a Phillips screw on this one. Sometimes it's a regular wing nut, but this one's a screw. It's about right here under the radiator on the passenger side.
Remove the battery terminals, remove the battery clamp and pull the battery out. That'll make removing the head on the driver's side a lot easier.
Okay, next up, you're going to want the air box out of the way. So this comes back to here. Remove that little plate. Standard screwdriver connection. Take off the clip. There's a little 10 at the bottom and 1 on the side right here.
And remove this bar right here. You have a 12 millimeter right here, and under the belt you should be able to see it. That's a 10 millimeter. On this engine in particular, it has one serpentine belt in which you use a 17 socket or a 17 wrench, and you turn this clockwise, which loosens up the tensioner, pull the belt off. Other Subarus, especially some of the older ones, you'll have 2 belts, in which case you'll just use 12 millimeter sockets to loosen up the belt and pull them off. Next, use a 12 millimeter to get off that. Some might be 10 millimeter. Remove that clip, take the wires, move them over, take off the AC clip as well, and this guy. And it looks like it's going also to the AC, the pressure sensor for the AC as well. Move the wires over. Take a 14, remove that pulley. Take a 12, remove that bolt for the alternator. This alternator bolt was already removed when we removed the bracket, and then pull the alternator out. Next, you're going to remove this this cover right here. You're going to take off that 12. You'll see a couple more 12s down there, and there's another one on the back side. Once you remove this, that'll give you access to the 2 12s at the lower point of the AC compressor, that 14 and that 14, which is attached down to the front engine mount. Once you get those out, then you can move these 2 12 millimeter bolts, that one right there and that one, and that'll allow you to pull the AC compressor and drape it over this direction. You do not have to remove the AC lines unless you want to. Then you can just, let the refrigerant release.
Much like the other side, got to take off this plate. It's about 4 12 millimeter bolts holding it on, 2 in the middle, 2 on the sides, and it'll swing out. You can pop it out.
On the driver's side, before you can fish this guy out, after you remove the bolts, you need to disconnect the cam solenoid, the oil pressure sensor, remove the 2 10 millimeter bolts that hold on the oil fill tube, and then you can remove this guy.
Okay, the oil does need to be drained for this job, otherwise it'll just pour out the heads when you get them off. So the drain bolt is that bolt you can see sticking down right there on the tip of my finger. Just undo that, all the oil will come out.
Once you have all that off, the 14 there and the AC compressor, you have that 14 millimeter and that 14 millimeter and that 14 millimeter right there.
You're gonna have to take off the coil clips and the positive ventilation tube just to get that bracket off. So now's a good time to just remove all the connections around the head.
Take out the radiator hose, that clamp, that clamp. Once you take that off, remove the coolant reservoir. It's held on by 10mm bolts. And then both fans also held on by 10mm bolts.
Okay, next up, you can do the power steering pump. There's 3 bolts in here. Normally, you can see one's missing on this one. The other one's right there. And there's one in the back on the bottom. It's pretty obvious. Remove the clip. It'll just slide out, and you could lay it on the side over there.
Okay, to avoid removing the radiator or the condenser, all that stuff behind it, in order to get a good-sized gun to fit back for the harmonic balancer. So this one really won't fit. You need to remove this center bolt for the harmonic balancer in order to get it off, so you can get the timing off and everything. So we have a nice strong 1/2-inch ratchet. You can use a breaker bar with a 22mm socket. This one's from Harbor Freight, by the way. It's like $30 from Harbor Freight. So we're gonna put it on reverse, and we're going to lay it on this side of the motor mount, not this side. Make sure it's on this side of the motor mount. Otherwise, when you crank the engine, it's gonna come up and whip you in the face. So we're gonna have it right here, and with somebody helping, we're gonna have them bump the engine briefly, just a quick bump. Okay? It's gonna look a little something like this. I have Jack in the driver's seat ready to bump the engine. Make sure that you just use a thumb or something like that, hold it straight on. And go ahead, Jack. And that reverses the bolt. So now you can pull that off. The harmonic balancer, you can just pry it off. Okay, you do not need a puller on this particular harmonic balancer. On most Subarus, you don't need a puller. But sometimes it is on tight. So when we leave the motor mount bracket on, we're going to use 2 screwdrivers, and we're going to rock it back and forth. And eventually, this thing right here will start moving out like that. It was about a 2-minute process, but we finally got it off. Next, you're going to remove this 14mm bolt, not these 2 12s. This one right here, and that 14mm bolt. That's it. Now it's time to remove the timing cover. It's going to come in 2 pieces. Some Subarus are 3 pieces. It's pretty much a whole bunch of 10mm bolts around the perimeter. They're going to look like that. You see all the 10s that are there, all those 10s. And then that'll give us access to the timing belt. Okay, now what I'm going to do, before I take the timing belt off, I'm going to set it at top dead center so you can see what they are like. So you have this mark right here. See it on the cam? That mark. The one with the divot. That's just a piece of paint right there. There's one that you can feel the divot. That one is for the passenger side cam. Yeah, this mark here, the one with the divot or the dimple, not the other mark. That's the little groove in the timing cover. That's where it's supposed to line up. So, like right there is lined up. That also means that if you look underneath here, you'll see, I just put the camera down there real quick. On the crankshaft, those marks are lined up. See the paint mark and the one above it. So that is top dead center. If you're not going to replace the belt during this job, then you can just use some whiteout and mark those lines. This is actually a new belt. The customer already had the water pump done. So yeah, there it is.
Also on the crankshaft, it looked like paint, but they are little divots. So you'll be able to see that as well.
Okay, as you can see, I marked the belt on the cams just to make it easier. You don't need to mark it. You can just put the belt on with the cam marks. As long as it's all lined up, it's in time. But now I'm going to decompress, or compress, sorry, the timing belt tensioner. I got my nice handy Harbor Freight screwdriver. Not Harbor Freight, this one's AutoZone actually.
AutoZone, yeah.
I'm going to pry it against the bolt under here. And this is going to take a little time, but if you'll notice, this little piece right here is going to start coming up.
Yeah,
just keep constant tension on it. It's already moving. See, it's starting to get loose.
We're going to put a pin that's designed to go in there.
Yeah. But this is the pin that actually comes with the tensioner. As you can see, the tensioner is new, but we kept the pin. The customer kept the pin at least. And there. Now when you relax, it still stays loose right there. And we're going to start pulling everything off.
And by the way, if you don't have a pin, you can just use an Allen wrench or something else that'll fit in there. And if you don't want to do that, you can just pull the belt off while you're holding it up as well, and then let it drop when you're finished.
So as you can see, while I still have tension on it, and I can pull the pin out, I can actually still pull the belt off. There we go.
It's easier on the smooth pulley, so you don't have to get over a big lip.
Well, not only that, it's easier with two hands as well.
Two hands as well.
Yeah. There we go.
Comes right off.
Comes right off.
There you go.
And just slowly relax that. But I'm still going to use the pin to keep it compressed to make the installation a lot easier.
Yeah. Okay, next we gotta take off the exhaust. That's pretty easy. There's a 3. You can see 2 of them on the video here. A little blurry, sorry. Right here. I'm gonna point out it right there in the back, and then on the other side of the exhaust. So there's 3 per head. Just after you do those, don't forget to do the O2 sensors, because it's gonna drop as soon as you get all the bolts out, and it you don't want to damage the wires or anything. So remember, just those 6 bolts, or they're nuts actually. It sits on studs. They are 14 millimeter, and it'll drop right down. You can just let it hang. It's not really a problem. Just make sure you do the O2 sensors.
Okay, right now we have a block of wood and a couple of rags on top. We're going to support the oil pan just enough to support the engine, because we're going to remove the bolts that hold on the engine mounts from the side.
There we go.
There we go. We just have it right below the oil pan, and we'll tell you why in a second. The bolt here, this bolt's already removed on the engine mount, and that nut, we are going to remove this bolt that goes through, and on the opposite end, we're going to remove that nut and that bolt as well. The reason why we removed the motor mount nuts and bolts, that's to give us more space to take off the valve covers, the coils. So if we want to work on this side, for example, we just pry this over that direction. Once we want to work on this side, we pry everything over that direction. So it gives us a lot more room to work with. Next, we're going to do the EGR pipe. Goes from the intake down to the back of this head. This is the worst part of the job, and it's a lot easier to do when we have the engine up. You got to reach down from the bottom and use a crescent. We'll show you in a little bit. Okay, now with the engine up, we can remove this long bolt.
I think you can kind of see it. Get a better angle right there.
Yeah, this bolt right here, as well as the 2 upper bolts that are holding on the motor mount bracket. Well, once we take it off, we'll be able to show you a little easier. Okay, this is the orientation that the driver's side engine mount bracket is in. You can't get this bolt out without raising the engine. So this is the nut that we took out in order to be able to raise the engine. This bolt and this bolt are easily accessible. Once the engine's raised up enough and we can start loosening up this one, you angle it down pull the bolt out. Now this engine mount bracket is very difficult to pull out from the top, so it's easier to push it back through the side of the transmission. This being out will give us better access to get to the EGR pipe.
Right here. Goes it down into the side of the head. It's pretty obvious when you're looking at it. The camera is not very conducive to show you. But it's right there, you'll see it. That'll give us the room. Okay, this is the EGR pipe we were talking about. It's pretty obvious going into the intake there. This is the part that goes into the head, so hold it like this. So you're gonna get an adjustable wrench, fit it on here, get it nice and tight like this. You might have to pry a little bit on the pipe, but if you've loosened the top one already, it'll be easy to push it slightly. And you're gonna get it down. Once you loosen it a little bit, you can wiggle the pipe while turning this, and it should come out pretty easy. Then you just snake it up and out of the side of the transmission.
And you do this from the from above the
above
engine.
the engine, driver's side.
And this is a lot easier once you take off that the engine mount bracket.
Yeah,
that we showed you earlier. Okay, with the engine raised up on the jack and shifted to the passenger side, that'll give us more room to take off the coils and the valve cover, all the 10 millimeter. There's 6 10s, 3 on top, 3 below. Okay, while he's doing that side, I'm gonna take out this 14, the 10, and the 10 behind it. Don't forget the 10 millimeter on the dipstick tube, and remove the clamp and pull that hose away.
Okay, so next we got the valve cover off. Everything's detached from the head. It's time to do the head bolts. The single overhead cam, you don't have to remove the cam train. The head bolts are exposed. He's pointing at one right there. It's a 12.14. Now most Subarus have these 12.14s for the head bolts. So got our trusty 1/2 inch 12.14 socket. So, there we go.
14 millimeter.
14.
12 point.
12 point.
Right over it.
You can't use the 6, it won't fit on there. And so there's 6 head bolts holding on, 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, just like the valve cover. And you want to take them off outside first. So you do these 2 on the side, those 2 on the side, then the middle, and a different process to put it together, but we'll tell you that when we get there.
Okay, we got the head out. Let me go over the best way to pull it out. Is because the head is so close to the frame, still you cannot pull these bolts out before you pull the head out. So you have to actually pull the head with the bolts still in it, just enough to clear the box, the block. Sorry. All right, Jack is removing the passenger side head. He's cracking the head bolts. We have this head that is ready now. We just resurfaced it. It looks great. It needs to be clean, you know, sprayed, but it's looking good.
Okay, so I did the other head a little quick and didn't record it, but taking off the passenger side head now. All the bolts are loose except one, so I can show you, but you can take out these top 2 bolts. You'll be able to pull those all the way out. The other ones you have to leave in. You can pull them out like pretty close to all the way, but our goal here is to get them out of the block completely, at least far enough, and then we'll be able to slide the head and remove the bolts as you angle it, you get room. So again, top 2, you can pull these all the way out, and then you're gonna have to pull these out as you're pulling the head out at the same time. You will have just enough room as long as you moved the engine to the side, just like we were explaining earlier. That's what I did on the driver's side. I did that one first because it's the harder one. Just moved it all the way over as far as I could to the passenger side, and you get just enough room, like a few millimeters, but it's enough, and you can swing it out and remove the bolts as you need and then pull the head out. So I'll do that now, and we'll show you when the head's off.
Go.
Okay, like I said earlier, these 2 bolts, the middle top, front top, are out. You will have room. Take those all the way out. Pull all the other bolts, the other 4, out as far as you can. And this is what I'm talking about. Pull the head out right now. you'll see gaskets in the way, but you can see you have just enough room. He pulled the gasket out, which means the bolts are separated. Now I can take this and just pull the head out. No need to pull the motor.
Okay, very important on these Subarus. Even though the heads are really short and the warpage isn't going to matter much on these heads, these do need to be resurfaced. As you can see, the resurface marks, nice and clean. Don't do it with a Brillo pad or a piece of sandpaper. Have it done the right way. Because when you put a new head gasket on, this right here feels smooth to your hand, but it's going to create bumps and divots, which will prevent the new head gasket from sealing properly. And you won't be able to tell right away when you start it up, but over time it will matter. So nice and resurfaced, not resurfaced. We're gonna do this one now. All right, both heads have been resurfaced and ready to be installed. All right, we have the new head gasket in. This is the Felpro, only brand you should actually buy. Up, there we go. See if I can record Jack putting the head in without having to help him. Okay, so Jack is
Getting in position.
dancing over there with the...
Okay, so like I said, these 4 bolts have to stay in. About this position is fine, but these 2 can be out. You can put those in later. We're gonna have it half in, so I can just slide it in and set it onto the block. Yeah, this is the hardest part, is not letting the gasket get caught on those bolts.
Getting those bolts in the bolt holes.
I'm gonna set one so I can balance it. Move this so I have room. Oh, that one's too far.
Looks like you might be in. Close.
That's very close. Pick up the intake.
Make sure the intake's out of the way. Oh, sorry.
And there it is.
Nice. And then just finger tight one of the head bolts and it'll stick. Next is torquing.
Okay, time for torquing. Got our trusty torque wrench here. So the first step is 22 foot-pounds in alphabetical order, which would be top, bottom, corner, opposite corner, corner, opposite corner again. That's the sequence they want you to do. So on these is a little different. We're gonna do the first bolts to 22 foot-pounds. You hear the click like a standard torque wrench. Do that on all of them. Second pass will be 51 foot-pounds. Then Subaru wants you to back off the bolts 180 degrees, which basically means till they're loose. Then you're going to redo it. The middle 2 bolts will be 25 foot-pounds, and the outside ones will be 18. And then from there, the next step will be 90 degrees on all the bolts. So straight 90-degree turn, all the bolts, and then a second 90-degree turn on all the bolts for a total of 180 degrees after you've torqued it to the specifications. Okay, just to reiterate, after you've tightened it and then loosened all the bolts for the second step, the third step, the middle 2 bolts are going to 25, just the middle 2. The outside ones, I misspoke earlier, are 11, but we will include an image of that. But 25 in the middle, foot-pounds, 11 foot-pounds on the outside, then the 2 sets of 90-degree turns. Okay, passenger head is all torqued. See, the cam is still in place. And you could just put the valve cover on now or later. Not really a big deal, but it's easier right now because you have the room. And when you shift the engine over, you're not gonna need that much space. The valve cover, if it touches the frame, that's far enough. Okay, we got the head back on, torque down, new spark plugs, coils are back in, valve cover's on, and you missed that part, but we already shifted the engine over. We just use the jack to do it. But now we have room to do the other side. He's putting on the gasket right now. It's easier. You put the gasket on first and trying to balance it on the bolts. But now we're gonna put the new head in just like the other side.
Now the head is back in. The torque specs for the head bolts on the driver's side is exactly the same as the torque specs from the passenger side.
Okay, now the heads are torqued, valve covers are in, coils, new spark plugs, all that jazz. Next, before you lower it and put the motor mount on, don't forget this pipe. Way easier to do right now when it's lifted up and that bracket's out of the way. So just don't forget that guy.
After you get the EGR pipe tightened up, now time to slip this bracket back in from underneath the car. Just slide it up past the hoses and get it situated, and then you can line these bolts up to it. Time to shift the engine back to the middle, right about there. And we're going to slowly lower it down to where the studs can be seen coming back up through there. So go ahead, go slow. All right.
Okay, now a little shifting.
I go up a little. There we go. Now we can feed it back and forth. About right there. Okay, hold on.
Okay, now that the engine is back on the motor mounts, it's time to put the exhaust on. Don't forget the gaskets. A lot of times they get stuck on the head studs, but just watch, they fall. And yeah, you have to have this. Anyway, the exhaust is real light at this point. It's still balancing on its little holder, so see, I can just push it up with one hand. So just push it up there and put those 6 nuts back on and reconnect the O2 sensors.
Okay, don't forget the oil dipstick tube. Just feed it in. You might have to have someone down below to guide it in for you. Then press and tighten up the nut bolt. Okay, we have the timing belt back on. The marks are basically back to where they were. And I'm gonna put the timing cover on. Timing cover's next.
Okay, with the exhaust on and the timing cover, it's time to start working on the intake and the brackets that we had before. So just the same order, put all the wires through the middle of the bracket where they go and the crankcase ventilation, and bolt the intake down.
All right, while Jack's over there doing the bracket with the intake, 12mm bolts, I'm putting the AC compressor bracket back on, 14, 14, and 14. Then we're going to start installing the AC, get all that back together. I'm going to place the power steering pump back in its slot. Okay, the alternator's on, power steering pump, AC compressor. Jack's finishing up with the...
Oh, I finished.
Oh, you already finished?
Yeah.
Well, he finished the intake bolts and bracket, fuel injector wire clips, coil clips. Time for the serpentine belt. Look at that pulley. There's Jack putting in the second radiator fan. You can see it's still daylight out. And so far this job's only taken about 4 or 5 hours tops. Batteries back in, fans are in, serpentine belt. Jack's putting on the intake tube and mass airflow sensor set up. The PCB at the back. This thing's ready to start once we add the fluids. All right, everything's topped off. I have a tall funnel here with coolant about halfway to the top. So as the engine's running, it'll just allow the air bubbles to come up while the coolant burps the system. But gonna clear the codes that it had, if it still had codes, because we disconnected the battery and started up. All right, we have the engine on live data. It's currently 51.8 degrees for the coolant temp. We're gonna start it up.
Ready?
Yeah, go ahead. There we go. Job done right.